Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Leader in You podcast. I'm Jenna Woolwind.
And I'm Dr. Lola Gershfeld.
And I'm Jack Gershfeld.
Every now and then, someone comes along who completely transforms the way we understand interactions, relationships, and the conflicts within them. Traditionally dominated by classical behavioral approaches and changing mindsets, Dr. Sue Johnson viewed relationships not as bargains, but as bonds. Inspired by John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, Sue blazed a trail that revolutionized the field of relationships. This transformation began in the 1980s. Today, no relationship model has more robust outcome studies than Sue's work on emotionally focused therapy, EFT, for couples. Sue has authored many books, including Hold Me Tight and Love Sense. Lola, with her husband Jack, attended the Hold Me Tight workshop years ago and noticed a correlation between the patterns in couples' relationships and patterns in workplace conflicts. Lola then began applying some of these techniques and strategies with teams and boards and seeing the transformative changes. Lola then flew to New York to study with Sue Johnson, and based on Sue's work and research in attachment and emotionally focused models, Lola developed the emotional connection process, or EMC, to apply in work and team relationships. EMC has now been integrated into over 1,000 cases to reduce workplace conflict, improve team dynamics, and transform company culture. Last month, on April 23rd, 2024, we received the sad news that Sue Johnson had passed away at age 76. To honor her immense influence on the development of the EMC process, we dedicate this podcast to Dr. Sue Johnson. Today with us, we have Jack Gershfeld. For those of you who don't know, Jack is a licensed marriage and family therapist and clinical director at a nonprofit community mental health clinic in Fullerton, California. He operates a manufacturing facility and has implemented the EMC process into his company culture and his leadership team. Jack has advised EMC leaders on the number of initiatives that help to formulate the EMC process. Jack is a lecturer at Pepperdine University. Jack is a master trainer at EMC leaders. Welcome, Jack. It's so great to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here today, combining the sadness of losing Sue Johnson, but also focusing on the legacy that she left behind that informed the EMC leaders how to transform companies' cultures and how to help people in the company to feel safe, connected, and productive.
Yes, we're looking forward to diving into that with you and Lola, and just really understanding this impact. And so we're going to start with you. How did you learn about Sue's work, and what were your initial thoughts about her passing?
Well, working with couples creates a very interesting challenge because every couple who walks into the office wants to resolve their conflict. And until the Sue Johnson came on board, we utilized a lot of behavioral work, a lot of cognitive work, which produced very little results. On average, behavioral work affects about 17% of the couples. That means that 2 out of 10 couples will have some temporary recovery from their distress, but the rest of them will still have distress. And the other part that was kind of difficult, that even as you finish the therapy with couples, you give it 6 months, a year, and they revert back to the original behavior. So taking that into consideration, one of my colleagues told me years ago, Jack, have you heard of Sue Johnson and a new theory of how to work with dyad? And the dyad is 2 people. So, and we all know that in a work environment, a lot of times it's 2 people. 2 people have conflict, 2 people discuss things, 2 people take care of the project. So at that time, I didn't make a connection between this. So I said, okay, let's try to apply it to the couples I work with. And immediately have found such a profound difference in the outcomes. And right about the same time, 2 years later, there was a study that came out of using the attachment framework to work with couples. And the study came out and said that 75% of the couples completely recover from their distress. Now, that's huge for any type of modality in the psychology world. To have 7 to 8 people out of 10, or 7 to 8 couples out of 10 recovering from their distress, that's huge by itself. We get 50%, we get excited. But then the same study showed that 90% of the couples show significant improvement in their relationship. Now, and there's some percentage of the couples that may not be well suited for this process. Well, once we start working with Lola, and I kind of introduced to Lola, I said, Lola, that's kind of interesting thing. Can we kind of go there and see what it is? And sure enough, we went out to Hold Me Tight workshop. It was very interesting. There was a lot of dynamics there that were not clear to us yet. And then I left it alone because I guess focus on my couples. That's it. But then I start listening to Lola doing her work. It was just like amazing. I go, wow. I didn't even think how to transfer it to the business world. And then I look at Lola and she's writing the books and she's creating forums and she's working with clients, implementing the strategy how to recover from distress and in the dysfunctional teams. So that the transformation.
Absolutely. And Lola, how about for you?
Well, it was very sad for me to hear about Sue's passing, and I feel like very attached to her because for the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years that I've been learning this process, it has really opened my eyes. I remember Jack coming to me, talking to me about, Hold Me Tight workshop and how we should, emotions actually play a big role in workplace conflicts or in relationships. And I was like convincing him, like, emotions have nothing to do with this. Okay. It's all about cognition. It's all, and this is what I was taught, certainly in my schooling and my master's degree and even doctorate degree, that if you change the thinking, everything changes, the behavior and emotions will change. And nobody ever taught me that actually it starts with emotions. And it was really mind-boggling for me to understand that how emotions are powerful in the interactions, where I was taught that emotions need to be managed, they need to be controlled, they need to be not talked about. And so this was really transformative for me to learn about this. And I feel like also, even though we did study attachment theory in our school, we really didn't know how to apply it in relationships. And I felt like Sue's work has helped me to really understand the patterns that people get stuck in and these similarities between the couples relationships and work relationships. Made it clear for me that attachment really helps us to understand what makes relationship works, how do these relationships go bad, and how to get people back to connection. So it almost like transformed me from feeling helpless with my boards and teams to feeling confident because now I'm empowered. I know a map. I know the map. I know what to focus on instead of focusing on who is right, who is wrong. I know that it's all about how do we reconnect people on an emotional level versus on cognition, trying to explain to them whose point of view is the right one. So it really gave me a relief. It gave me a framework, and it really helped me to understand relationships a lot.
Absolutely. And so interesting because I feel like people can divide those two, right? Between like your personal relationships and your work relationships and seeing really there's a huge crossover no matter what relationship. So it's really fascinating. But on the personal level, back to you guys as a couple, or how would you describe that EFT has impacted your relationship together?
What a great question, right? We've been married for 43 years and we've been
God,
living.
that is such a accomplishment.
It's a milestone. I'm kind of proud of that. And then during those 43 years, in the last 25 years, we lived together because our kids grew up and left and had their own families and their own kids. So as with any couples, you go through bumps. In the beginning of our relationship, we kind of looked at each other and said, divorce is not an option. We fight through everything. Doesn't matter. Nowhere in our vows we said that we have to be happy. We said that we have to have a family and protect each other and take care of each other, right? So if you don't get a little bit unhappy, it's okay. Listen, you work through this. but that desire to not to ever think about walking away from the relationship was very strong for us. So the foundation was good, but we had bumps. Like every couple, we had bumps, especially when kids left. There was a big transition. Then they got married, big transition, and grandkids, big transitions. So many big transitions. So Lola came out and says, "Well, why don't we just go and see somebody to help us with this?" We go, okay. And we went to a couple of therapists. Didn't work too much. It's all about cognition. All tell us about who is right, who is wrong, navigating, being a judge in the room, deciding who is doing things right and who is not. And it didn't feel right. It didn't feel right because no matter what happens, you walk out of the session, it's just you're more defeated than you helped. And until we bumped into EFT. Now I don't think it was a smooth ride because we had no idea what it was. But personally, it was the only modality that helped both of us. And that's a key thing. When you work with couples, you can't just help one person, help the other person. And how do you help one person without the other person feeling that you're against them, right? So that's what framework, that's my experience in EFT. You can both people, and while attending to one, you're not invalidating the other person. That's a big part of it. We start our journey, and we kind of look at that doing couples work and connecting together is our job, is our mandate to have a life together. So we look at it as no professional person who is involved in any type of sports would even think to do this without a coach, without the trainer, without somebody guiding them, right? But we in our society, we feel like we give people education, all the STEM skills, put them out in the world and say, have a relationship. And they do have a relationship, and that's why we have a divorce rate that's very high. So it had a personal effect on us because we know how our relationship works, but it had a profound effect how we look at the team dynamics and the company operations and how I personally see every person who walks through my door. And a big part of it is, of course, sometimes people tell me something and I want to say, no, that's not how it is. Let's change it. But the bottom line is, if you focus on what they tell you and slow things down and help them to navigate through their emotional experience in the moment, because typically when somebody comes to you, there's one part of them that wants information, but there's another part of them wants to know that they're doing things right. They're not failing. This is a normal part of the life, but yet we don't learn that. Our society kind of skipped that on our education career, right? So we go through the kindergarten all the way through the master's degree, maybe PhD degree, and not a single class on how to have a relationship. Not only personal relationship, but how do you have a relationship at work? And how do you transition when you say goodbye at work and come home? How do you say hello at home? And when you say goodbye at home and go to work, how do you say goodbye at home and come back and say hello to work? And how do you transition this? And for me, the attachment approach or EMC approach, and that taking attachment framework and moving into the business world made so much sense. In fact, you can't use it only at home or use it only at work. Once you start using that framework, it transcends the locations and places and people, because every person in front of you now becomes human. And part of the EMC approach is to accept what the person is telling you just the way it is and help navigate through this or help to make sense out of it. It makes such a perfect sense, but without the training, it's very counterintuitive, and we get stuck in it. So personally, it had a big, profound effect on our relationship because we want to live by these principles, and we do the best we can to live by these principles. Doesn't mean we don't have our flare-ups and all the other stuff. But what's interesting about the attachment framework is it says very simple thing that if you have flare-ups in your relationship, that means you care about each other and you're fighting for your relationship. It's not a bad thing. Now, for me personally, when a couple comes to me and they say they're fighting, I go, yeah, great. As long as you're fighting, we can fix it, okay? The difficult part comes in when people stop fighting, when they say, I give up, I don't want to do anything, I'm done with the relationship, right? And the same thing at work. As long as your employees tell you, hey, I'm not happy with this, can you change this? Can you modify this? And why are we doing this? That's actually a great thing because they care about your company, they care about the product, they care about customers, they care about the process. And if we suppress that initiative to the point where they say, I don't care anymore, then the person who provides so much value will disappear from your environment. And everybody becomes compliant, but there's no care anymore. That's what's so dangerous. So there's a big implications here from the personal, for me, from the personal life that we have with Lola. And I intend to another 20, 30 years at least with Lola. So I have that goal to the business world where we all experience this stress anyway. So why not bring it in and say, let's find a way so we don't have to feel stressed. And that's kind of my view on that.
And I can add that, Jack and I not only lived together for 43 years, but we also worked for 27 years out of those 43 years. So we built several companies. So we understand the dynamics that happens, and like what Jack was saying, transitioning, not only that you have a personal relationship, but how do you actually behave at work, and how does this work interactions impact your personal life? And it had impacted us in a difficult ways and in a profound ways. But because we learned about emotions and how to slow things down and how to recognize the disconnections that we had, or the triggers that we go through, it really helped us to communicate better. It really did. It really did. It helped us to slow things down in a way that we can understand what is it that we need in moments of stress, and how do we ask for what we need. How do we become more vulnerable with each other and not be afraid that somehow the other person is not going to accept us or accept our vulnerability and not to be there. So in a way that we have learned this process, we have become better at tuning into each other, learning about each other, and being there for each other. And that to me huge, because it only strengthens our bond, and the significance of this relationship helps us to do that.
Oh, that's so wonderful. And there's a couple things that really you guys were saying that jumped out at me. And one was being the point, like education, you go through all of this schooling in life, but nobody teaches you how to be in a relationship, which is just fundamental personally and on a professional level. And being a mom of like a young child and looking into schools, like diving into education, it's really interesting to think of like if people really knew about this when they were younger, the impact it could have on someone's life. And so great that people like you guys are taking this and spreading the word. And then also what you said I thought was really interesting. As a therapist, it is such a great tool to have too, because you are helping both people at once. Where I know that would be, I feel like it'd be really difficult to play the mediator and feel like you're not picking a side, but this really is. And, I've been through obviously the EmC process and everything, but it really is not to point any fingers, but to have people really work through it. So great
Yeah.
that you guys have found this and have further developed it. So
Thank you.
And it's and you brought up something important. The most important skill that an EmC professional can develop is helping one person in the organization that has conflict with the other person to feel validated and accepted, while also doing this with the other person so they don't feel disconnected. Because you're absolutely right. If we're going to present ourselves as judges, it becomes a very difficult process.
absolutely. Because then you lose that person.
Yeah.
Then they feel put in the hot seat and they become disconnected. So it's all
Well,
really
we're very sensitive. Humans are very sensitive, and those sensitivities, there's nothing wrong with them. Many different people grow up in different ways, and they develop different sensitivities. And as a manager, you may accidentally trigger those sensitive areas and not understand what's happening. But what I like about the EmC process, it gives you very clear steps and a map and how to get through this, so that to protect that integrity for each person involved in the conflict.
Absolutely. Are there any particular moments or insights from EFT that stand out to you both?
Yeah, there's many moments. We probably can talk for hours on those moments. And and probably if you would talk about personal relationship versus business relationship. So I'm going to touch a little bit on business relationship first, and then I can jump into the personal relationship. On the business relationship, part of the EmC process is the creation of tools, and that's what I love about it. There are 6 tools that you can use to navigate through any type of conflict in an organization. And what's nice, studies after studies shows that it transcends the cultural backgrounds. It transcends different languages. It transcends geographical locations, right? That's how kind and humane that process is. And one tool that I like the most is always to slow things down, because in the heat of the conversation, it's tough to make the right decision and not to hurt accidentally people you're working with. So be able to have the self-discipline and slow things down and take it from a place of, when we slow things down, we can resolve things. If we rush through things, then things are going to get pretty difficult. And it reminds me of every difficult occupation. For example, we don't see firemen running to the fire. They walk, right? Why do they walk? Because they know if they rush, they will fall down, they're going to get hurt, and then they will not going to be available to resolve the emergency, right? When we talk about scuba divers or divers, if anything happens underwater, it's always stop, think, and act. It's never act right away, because they know if they don't stop and think, they don't get to action, right? And almost in every dangerous profession, for you to get out of the difficult situation, you have to slow things down. So I would probably contend to say that relationship is a dangerous occupation. So because it's dangerous, because you trust people you work with, you trust people at home, and therefore what they say and what they do affects you much more than a stranger in the car passing by at 60 miles an hour next to you. That's why it's so dangerous, because your heart is open, your mind is open, and what they say can hurt you really, right? So it's profoundly affected me to know that when people are sharing something, no matter how difficult it is for me to take it in, they're sharing with, they want to be heard, they want to be accepted, they want to be viewed as a person that provides some value. And when I can slow down and make sense of what they're sharing, I don't have to solve their problems, but I can accept them and have a conversation on a human level. And once we de-escalate, once the heat temperature in the conversation drops down to like a normal, 72 degrees, then we can solve any problem. That's what makes it so amazing. So that's why I like the tool. The number one tool is to slow things down. For me, that's the first step. When I get into that tool, everybody slows down. Everybody starts now processing things, and things get resolved. Now, on a personal level, that's even more dangerous, right? You live with a person, and you are so vulnerable for getting hurt. So if you accidentally say something or do something, even though you know that person loves you, but it can get right to the core of your hurts, right? It can get right to your heart, and that dagger that's flying, they may hit you right in the heart where it hurts, right? So slowing down and pulling back and saying, I think we're hurting each other. Can we slow down and just take a breather? Let's come back in 5 minutes and see where we are. Helps to reestablish the communication, helps to reestablish the conversation, and start focusing on each other hurts instead of focusing on looking at each other as though you're enemies. So pretty amazing process.
Agreed.
Yeah, I know that personally that I'm recognizing the patterns, what people do, and recognizing of like the pursue withdraw cycle is the most common cycle that people get into during the conflict. And interpreting the behavior for the strategy to reconnect because they want the connection back really opened my perspective on understanding the conflicts that happen. And once you recognize the pattern, it's almost like you can step out of the negative cycle, so you're not consumed by it, you're not empowered, or you're not taken over by that negative pattern. And that really helped me to understand that conflict is not really about content, or if you stay in content, you will continue the conflict. But if you get out of content and focus on the emotional experience, where you can, like Jack said, slow things down, recognize the emotions that are happening for you, articulating those emotions, organizing those emotions, you actually become more open to resolving that conflict. Because now, like as Jack pointed out, that we do want to be heard and valued and know that we matter to the other person. By slowing things down and taking the content out of conflict, you actually resolving the conflict faster than keeping content alive by arguing about, whatever the content is. So that was a big shift for me, to remove the content from the conflict resolution and focus more on emotional connection. Uh, Another thing that really helped me, I think, is that recognizing the secure attachment. The key question in secure attachment is, are you there for me? ARE, which is accessible, responsive, and engaged. And I didn't understand that these three components really help you to become emotionally intelligent. I mean, I remember reading books, Primal Leadership, Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, and I always wanted to be that person, but I didn't know how to be that person. And so by having the formula of that ARE acronym, accessible, responsive, and engaged, it helps me to constantly become more aware. Am I accessible? Can I access my emotions? Am I responsive? Can I express my emotion? Can I respond to the other person's emotions? Can I tune into their emotional experience? Can I slow it down in a way that I can understand what's happening for them? And can I still be emotionally engaged even though I feel hurt and I feel out of bounds? Can I still be emotionally engaged in the conversation and understanding their perspective? Can I also put my hurt on the little bookshelf, or like on a shelf, until I hear them, and then come back to my emotions? So that transition helps you to actually become emotionally intelligent, and that was a huge transition for me. And as I work with teams and companies and managers or leaders, supervisors, I can see how they integrate this work into their daily interactions, and it helps them to deal with customers. I mean, I had a conversation the other day with a person who transitioned to a new role, and the customer comes into the store very upset, and the manager walks in and tries to help the customer and does not succeed. The manager then says, I need to remove myself from this stressful situation, and leaves the newly hired employee with the customer, with this aggressive customer. And then because this newly employee had this training on emotional connection on the EmC process, she was able to de-escalate. She was able to validate the customer's emotions, stay with the customer's experience, help them to kind of like calm down and feel heard and valued. And then after customer left, she was able to go back to the manager, say like, are you okay? And be there for the manager, help the manager to come back to the floor, to the store. Because when we don't know how to do that, what do? We just kind of like isolate ourselves. We go into each other's offices or corners and we just sit there and we don't know what to do. We feel helpless. And that's where I was when I didn't know this process. And so Sue's work, I love Sue for that, is that it really helped, it opened the doors for me to understand these patterns, to understand what to do and how to re-engage people back into the conversation so they can feel safe and connected again.
Amazing. I Thinking about professional influence, I kind of wanted to tap into the creation of EmC and ask how the development of the emotional connection process went and what her teachings in particular inspired and influenced the whole process.
Well, then maybe I can start with that. I was very frustrated with my workplace, as an HR manager, as a CFO, as a board member. I couldn't really understand why is this so difficult for people who are so smart, technically don't know how to talk to each other. And it was really mind-boggling for me. I remember having us, these long board meetings with no progress and somebody would be angry, the other person would shut down, and then like, how do you actually re-engage them? So when I was at this couples workshop and seeing and learning about these patterns that couples would get into, I immediately started to think to myself, wait a second, we had the same pattern in the workplace. And when I began integrating and learning Sue's work, at first I didn't understand what was she doing with these couples, like what is she doing? So I started to really dissect, the steps, the strategies, the process. And Jack really helped me to design, the most important worksheet, which is the EmC reconnection form, which really outlines a repeatable, structured process that you do step by step to help people to get into that emotional experience professionally and safely, and how to respond and what do you say and how do you navigate through it and how do you actually teach it to others so they can do it over and over and over and over again. And so, as you, I think, mentioned in the beginning, we have completed over 1,000 casework to do this process. And every single time we do it, it works like a charm. So now when I teach this process and we have specific tools and forms and really approach, the structured approach gives people confidence. It gives people predictability. It gives people reliability to know that if they use this process and if they use the steps, they will get reconnected. They will repair their relationship. They will feel more cohesive and free to express themselves again. They will feel understood and heard and valued. All of that provides a really comfortable way to understand how to deal with conflicts. My gosh, the latest research is companies spend billions of dollars because of lost hours on workplace conflicts. I mean, if you think about your company, and it shows that I think the CPP report shows 4.3 hours per week per employee is wasted on workplace conflicts. That's quite significant amount of energy and time and wasted. It's not just the conflict; it's what happens after. People have sleepless nights. They have health issues. They don't think well. They lose their project focus. So all of that becomes very costly for companies. And once you have this process, it becomes like another work procedure, like another work instruction that you can do to save your relationship, to continue move forward, and to create a culture where people can actually enjoy working together, feel satisfied, feel like they want to come back to work. Because many call in sick just because of workplace conflicts. They don't want to deal with it. So I feel like it's very empowering for people to use this process.
Absolutely, definitely. Is there any specific success stories that you want to share, helping coach people with EMC leaders, and Jack also in your company, that because you've implemented the process so much, and just, on top of that, the long-term impacts that you've seen, like the success of when it comes to like successes after having, implemented this process?
Yeah, I think probably that's a key, right? What benefits do you see once you implement the process? In manufacturing facilities, we implement international standards processes like ISO 9000, make sure that you have a quality control, ISO 1400, 14,000, make sure that you have you care about the planet. There's so many standards that we use in the company to actually deliver product that works every single time, right? But then comes the human part of it. There was time in my life where I thought that people come and go. There's nothing you can do. They will show up, they will leave, right? But the more I start working with the EMC process, what I realized that every person is unique and every person is irreplaceable. Yes, you'll get somebody else, but they're not going to be the same. They're not going to provide the same thing. So this concept of, everybody's replaceable, I'm strongly against that concept. Well, yeah, you'll get another person in the place, but it's not going to be the same. So part of the implementing the process was to teach the management that when the person comes to you, they come because they care about the company. Creating the common attachment framework. The common attachment framework could be they care about the company, they care about the product, they care about their coworkers, they care about their teams, they care about their boss, right? There's so many attachments. I almost look at them like anchors, right? So when a person comes to you and complains about something or shares with something or tells you they're not happy or they're pissed off, whatever it is, they're basically looking at some of the anchors and saying that anchor is in danger. And I'm raising this little big flag, red flag, and please listen to me, right? If we don't have this framework, we're just gonna say, hey, we have one guy or one gal who is just creating all the problems. Let's get rid of her or get rid of him. Well, the problem is as soon as they leave, somebody else is going to do the same thing. The problem doesn't go away with letting a person go. It gets worse. Right? So implementing process takes a little time. It needs to go from the top first. You got to train the top people, and the most important thing, the owner of the company or the president or the department manager, they need to buy into this process. They need to see the value of it. For me, the value is no turnover. It's as simple as this. Not that it's a low turnover, because we require people to learn this process when they come to work. We focus on this acceptance, validation, reassurance, right? Then once they work a certain period of times, people don't leave because all of the things that they bring up, they get attended to. It's never seen as them creating a problem. It will always look at as people fighting for maintaining their anchors, right? They're fighting for their customer, they're fighting for their department, they're fighting for the product success, they're fighting for a connection with different department manager, right? All of these fights they have internally, but a lot of times when they come to you, it's like, big deal, and if you're not aware of this, the reaction could be pretty big. I don't want to talk about, forget about this, not important, that's none of our business, let's just move on with doing what's happening with our department. What we're learning, what I learned, that as long as people at work fighting for all these anchors, I as manager need to support them. I need to give them voice, and I need for them to feel safe. There's so many good examples. I'll just bring a recent example. A couple of months ago, one of my design engineers came in and she shared with me some of the difficulties with the product, and we worked out a plan how to deal with this. And she left. And about 2 days later, she's slowly walking in my office and says, I need to tell you something. I said, what's happening? I think I made a big mistake. I gave you wrong information, and all the planning that we did, actually, we should not be doing it because wrong information created all these actions, right? And for me, that was pretty important because she has the courage and she has the comfort and safety to come and say that, knowing that she's not going to be judged in any way. She's not going to be made example of. She's not going to be written up. The safety, that's what emotionally focused approach, emotional EMC connection approach creates. It's a safety for employees to come in and say that when they do something wrong, it's okay. We sit down, she shared with me, we reworked the plan, put everything back together, everybody got notified, everybody took the big exhale, and that was it. It was non-event. In a way, what EMC process does, it prepares you for emergencies in your organizations. And whenever there's somebody escalated in an organization, that's an emergency, right? I have a good friend, his name is Doug Ritter. He teaches military how to survive, military personnel. And he says that if you prepare for emergency, it never becomes emergency because you already prepared for it and you know how to do it. He said, so the emergency becomes emergency when you don't know what to do or when you're not prepared for it. But the EMC process gives you emergency preparedness. You know exactly what to do when something happens in the company, when there's disconnection between different departments, when there's infighting about the customer or the products or design process, or customers that call in that create a lot of distress to the salespeople. All of these points of emergency points, if we don't know what to do, if we don't have the process to deal with this, we react to those emergency situations. What EMC process did to us is it removed reactivity. We know what to do. It's very straightforward. We slow things down. We figure things out. We attend to each other's fears and worries about what happened right now. We reach out to the customer. We understand their experience. In the process, we can guess what worries and fears that other people may have, and even if we don't have an ability to talk to them, because sometimes customer may not want to talk to us, and we address those. When we address fears and worries and sadness and surprises, then the content resolves. We can have a safe conversation. The content. I love what Lola said. Learning to live in outside of the content for conflict resolution is amazing, because once you resolve the conflict on a personal level, on human level, you can sit and discuss all the contents and you don't get triggered. You don't get activated. You don't get escalated, because you know in your hearts of hearts that people care about you. They care about the customers. They care about all these different parts of your company. So there's no sensitivity. The sensitivity in emergency discussions or in difficult situation in the company occurs because your innate need to feel safe is not being addressed. With the EMC process, we know where to go. It's a difference between shooting in the dark or having full light and a big scope, and you know exactly where you're shooting, and you know you're going to get there, okay? And plus, when your bullet flies, it has automatic navigation system to get to the target, right? That's a difference versus just shooting and then say, what happened? Why did I miss the target, right? So for me, it's a big process. But the other part of it is, even though we talk here about psychology and roots and most of the processes in the world, any process you have in the organization, it's always rooted in psychology. That's where it's all. Industrial psychology is a big deal. But I want kind of people to understand that nobody's doing psychological work with you. The process is very mild and comfortable and safe. So you don't have to expose your personal vulnerability. You don't have to share things that you don't want to share, because the process is simple. You navigate through steps, you understand what's happening for you, understand how important things for you, the other person understands how important certain things for you. And the most important thing out of this, to accept that, hey, if I say I worry about the customer, I worry about the customer. I don't need to have somebody tell me that you should not be worried about the customer. That's my customer. I'm going to be worried as much as I want. So being able to to know in a conversation that what matters to you is being accepted is such a big deal, because once it's accepted, then we can navigate into content. But before that, we stay with emotions. So I thank you, Lola, for sharing and talking about the content versus the attending to emotional distress.
I love working with teams, and I love working with resolving conflict because I consistently learn from clients and consistently learn. It's kind of like a confirmation for me every single time I do it, and I take them out of that dark place into the light. It just reaffirms how important relationships are in our culture, for our thriving. It's like we are fish in the water, and our water is relationships. It reaffirms me how powerful relationships are to our brain, the cognition, the way we can have access to our cognition, and to the way we can work well together. So it just reaffirms, and the science, right? The science has, I think, blossomed for the last 10 years on attachment, the neuroscience, really understanding how important our emotional environment is. In fact, I was reading the magazine the other day about the importance of creating a safe emotional environment for children and how their brain develops when they do have a good relationship with their parents. I feel the same way in the workplace. Like manager and employee relationship is like having parents and child relationship. Managers to the employees is a parent role. It's like a parent attachment figure. And having good relationship with your boss only invigorates you. It empowers you. It motivates you. It engages you. So, and I think sometimes managers don't see the importance of that role and how powerful they are in terms of creating an engaging and connecting environment for employees to do their work is their relationship. So for me to consistently learn and to share this process and to uh, encourage people to learn about emotions, learn about emotional connection, and to understand that relationships are, if you want your people, like Jack says, there's no turnover. When you have a connected culture, people want to be in that culture. They experience a thriving environment because they're so connected in that culture. And I hope people will feel motivated to learn about the work that Sue has done in her emotionally focused approach to couples therapy, in our work as an emotional connection. And they can read the book. Emotional Connection book is the best book. We have the Connected Culture book. We have training programs, the EmC master classes, and to really experience a transformation in their relationship, whether it is with the manager, with their team, with their coworkers, and with their personal life. It has really transformed my life and my relationships in all aspects of my human existence.
Well, that's so powerful. And if just to wrap up, when we talk about Sue's legacy, what do you think is the most enduring part of it? And what do you hope people take from it? How do you think it'll affect EMC leaders? And just any closing thoughts you guys really want to say about, what her work meant and how you hope it continues to grow and thrive. And maybe memories you have with her.
Yeah, Sue Johnson left such a huge legacy and such a big footprint in the psychology world. And what's interesting for me, if I look at the history of her going through developing the emotionally focused approach and convincing everybody that attachment is the key for relationships, she had a lot of pushback. Many people didn't like that. Many people thought that she's crazy and she doesn't understand what she's doing, and how can she even think about emotions when we have all this body of knowledge about behavioral work and cognitive work. What impressed me about her is perseverance. She never gave up. She knew what the true north is, and she followed the star, and she did not stop until she reached the place where people saying this is a way to help people to reconnect. And she left behind her the legacy of thousands and thousands of therapists who have been trained and who love her work and who imitate her accent and who wants to be just like her. And that's an amazing thing. And without her being where she is and starting from early 1980s throughout her life and to this year when she passed away, she has always been a big figure in the field, and her conversations are engaging and her podcasts are addictive because she has all this passion behind it, and she was able to transcend all the naysayers in her life and bring to the world one thing that we all needed: ability to stay connected with people we love. And that's my view of her. And that springboard that the EmC process took, we couldn't do it without her. It's ability to take everything that she has developed, take all the background from John Bowlby, from Salvador Minuchin, from Fritz Perl, all of these people, from Carl Rogers, right? All of them combined together have created this wonderful model that is very humanistic, and it helps people to stay safely connected with each other. Her ability and her vision to put it all together, it's amazing. It's amazing what she's done and how she persevered, and we owe her. We're standing on her shoulders today because she was able to do that, and that's my memory of her, and her being bigger than life.
And she always inspires me, because as I brought the emotions into the workplace or attachment framework, I felt also kind of like ridiculed, or I remember, people are walking out from my uh, sessions saying like, what is this? And making fun out of it. Like, no, emotions don't belong in the workplace. And for me to come to stand there and say, no, emotions are important. She gives me courage, she gives me strength, and she gives me that perseverance. So I feel like by continuing the EmC process, I will continue her legacy to say, hey, Sue, you're not only impacting the couple's work, you're impacting the business world. And I am there to share your legacy and continuing your work, to know that people can resolve workplace conflict, improve engagement, and create the culture where everyone can thrive.
That's a beautiful legacy. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing, your experience with Sue and how it's affected in such a positive way your work and personal relationships. This was a really wonderful session and discussion about it. And I'm sure she's where she is now, appreciating the thoughtful words. And yeah, may she rest. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Jen.
Jack.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.